Goblins, Brandon here. If you enjoy what we do and you'd like to help support us create more and maybe even take the podcast to weekly, then the best way right now that you can support us is to head over to patreon.com/goblinsgrowlers. You can find all the different stuff we do there, one-page dungeons, bonus audio for things, all kinds of stuff. So head on over there, and even if it's just $1 or, however much you're comfortable doing, or if you can't put anything towards the Patreon, just tell a friend about it. Tell somebody about the podcast. That's another great way to support us. So patreon.com/goblinsgrowlers, and we'll see y'all soon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Goblins and Growlers Podcast. I'm Josh Maltby at Black Cloak DM on mostly Discord.
Yeah, I'm Brandon Dingus at Way of Brandalore on probably mostly Discord these days. And Josh is here today to get punished.
It's not a punishment.
It is. You probably pissed off Alon, and that's why he said that you have to be on this episode. But as promised last week, we have a special guest here. Ash, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself real quick.
Hello, I'm Ash. I'm wiki on most platforms, and I am super just really into animatronics.
And that brings us around back to the punishment. Is I talked about this a little bit at the end of last week's or 2 weeks ago's episode, where I was talking about this person that we met at Queen City Anime Con who comes into our panel cosplaying as Chuck E. Cheese, Charles Entertainment Cheese himself, and ended up having just a bizarre conversation from the stage. And Alon is just sitting there, just baffled by what's happening in front of him, like he's discovering electricity. Because these people get so irritated when I just go off on rants talking about like Billy Bob's Wonderland or Showbiz Pizza or anything like that. And I had never quite met a kindred soul who shares my appreciation for these air-powered robots. And even though it's completely sort of off scope for the podcast topics that we usually have, unless we're counting the weird tangents that I go off on, we're going to talk about animatronics today with Ash, and Josh is just going to have to deal with it. Actually, Josh's purpose is very functional today, because when we go too far off the deep end, he is supposed to reel us in as a normal person and be like, "Now, what's that? Explain that. Can you tell me what that thing is? Why do I care about this?" The short answer is you probably don't, but hopefully it'll be interesting.
I'm here as someone who's probably spent more time being familiarized with Five Nights at Freddy's characters than I have with actual real-life animatronics, even though in my childhood, I went to Chuck E. Cheese's a couple of times. I went to one other chain, but I don't know what the name of it would have been, but there was a penguin that was part of their show. So I was like, that's cool.
That wouldn't have been Pizza Time Theater.
Maybe.
No, Josh, you're young.
I don't know.
Josh, you're like 11 years younger than me. There's no way that you were around for a Pizza Time Theater.
I don't know. It was in Colorado, and it was sort of out in the middle of nowhere. So
I bet
the possibilities are endless.
I bet, and then we'll get into a structured part of this soon, I promise. But I bet what that was is similar to a Billy Bob's Wonderland situation where somebody bought the old animatronics and just remasked them and stuff like that. But
I agree 100%, actually.
Yeah, that's actually very prevalent. And I have a relevant story to tell later about this. But anyway, getting back to this. And but for anybody who's playing continuity chess with me, I think I may have introduced Ash as Sydney in the last episode. But then today Ash was like, by the way, I go by Ash socially. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I screwed that up. But Ash, if you could just start by telling us a little bit about you, and because these people have heard my stupidity, but if tell us a little bit about you and how you got into just sort of loving the animatronics of your Chuck E. Cheese and your Showbiz Pizza, etc.
So I'm a cosplayer, obviously. Mm-hmm. I have cosplayed multiple Showbiz Pizza characters and in the near future Chuck E. Cheese characters, but right now I've only got the one.
Uh-huh.
But I actually found animatronics through, and I hate to say this, through TikTok.
Uh-huh.
Because there
Those
was this
damn
guy,
TikTok animatronics people.
Yeah. The TikTok animatronics fandom.
Yeah.
there was this guy that owned an entire Rockfire Explosion set, and he was slowly getting them in from Aaron one by one, which we will definitely get into later.
Yeah. Aaron Fector, the creator of the Rockfire Explosion.
He made these like ridiculously insane videos of the animatronics while they were aired down, and like it was like a YouTube poop but Rockfire Explosion, and I was like, these guys look pretty cool. And then all of a sudden I couldn't stop thinking about them, and now I'm here. So
yeah, because if you don't mind me saying, like, I got the impression that you're a lot younger than me. So you
I'm 22.
Oh, okay. You're almost 20 years younger than me. Yeah. So like I was around in like I was born in 81. So I was around in the mid to late 80s, sort of in the twilight of Showbiz Pizza. I remember going to Showbiz Pizza a bunch of times. I remember my grandfather taking me there one time and just being like, sort of like weirdly freaked out by Fats Geronimo, the gorilla playing the keyboard there. I went to the one in Barbersville a lot when I was a kid because I lived just outside Charleston, and that was back when it was a Showbiz Pizza. We're really getting off the rails here. Like, we need to set up some foundational structure for these things, for this whole conversation. But so anybody who hasn't listened to me ramble on about this, and Ash, feel free to jump in and correct me or do whatever you need to do. But like, there was so Nolan Bushnell, who was the founder of Atari, was like, hey, let's, take all this technology that I'm making all this money off of with Atari and try to come up with some sort of other family entertainment kind of situation for it. So he created, it was Pizza Time Theater first, right? Yeah. So he created Pizza Time Theater, which if you go back and look at any videos from the late 70s of Pizza Time Theater, it almost looks like a primitive Chuck E. Cheese. With a lot of the characters, because you see like Jasper Jowls, the dog who plays the guitar, you see Chuck E. Cheese, you see like a really weird version of Helen Henny, and Pasquale, the drumming pizza chef, and that eventually morphed into Showbiz Pizza, because it's weird because it like branched, right? Because there was like Pizza Time Theater, and then it sort of spun off, and then there was Showbiz and Chuck E. Cheese, but all three of them sort of coexisted at the same time in some corporate structure?
Pretty much. So when Showbiz was created, it was actually created as its own unique thing, because Aaron Fector, the creator of the Rockfire Explosion, the band that plays in Showbiz Pizza Place, started off by making like regular inventions. He's an inventor.
Yeah, no, you can keep the quotes up when you say he's an inventor.
Yeah. As time went on, he kind of fell into animatronics, and then once Showbiz was created, and after Chuck E. Cheese's like 5 bankruptcies, they ended up merging. So shortly after that.
Yeah, with concept unification.
Yep.
I have a little bit of context for this because I, as a video game enthusiast, have studied the history of video games. And so I know that Nolan Bushnell's his goal at the end of the day was to make arcades be something that was for the whole family, when at the time it was mostly something you would find in like bars.
Right. Which
you're not going to have a whole lot of like 12-year-olds wandering into bars and it being an okay scene.
No.
Yeah.
So he was like, well, these like everybody can enjoy arcade machines. So I need a place that is safe for kids of all ages to come and play these games. And that's, how all of that kind of gets spun up.
Yeah. And I'm sort of unapologetically team Showbiz because that's just what I was raised on. Like, to this day, the idea of going into a Chuck E. Cheese just makes me want to stand there with like my hands on my hips. Like, well, that's not the real thing. Showbiz Pizza was the original. And even though it wasn't, but, that's what sticks out in my head so much. So, Fector created Rockfire Explosion. He has his warehouse down in, was it Orlando? I know it's down in Florida somewhere, but yeah, where up until very recently, he still had tons of boxes like full of produced but unsold Rockafire Explosion animatronics because the bottom just fell out of the market. And because Showbiz expanded too fast and there was just too much saturation in the robot pizza market, and they needed to dial it back a little bit. But it's interesting. If I'm sure you've watched the Rockafire Explosion documentary.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was interesting, and I wonder if you picked up on this too, just talking about Aaron, that they talk about some of the initial funding rounds and people who financed Showbiz, and one of them is an older gentleman whose last name is also Fector, and they never spell it out in the documentary that it was Aaron Fector's dad, but I'm almost I've never looked it up, but I'm almost positive that so his dad was one of the guys who did a round of funding for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, because talking about Aaron, the reason I was like, oh yeah, he's an inventor. I think this is in that documentary too. I can't remember because I've seen so many of these videos where he sort of talks about how he got how he graduated from college and he really wanted to change the world and come up with all these inventions like an air-powered car or something like that. And you really get this sort of Doc Brown feeling from him when he's talking.
Yeah.
He's always he's just on the verge of developing the flux capacitor. But he never quite makes it. And he makes it sound like he just sort of fell into animatronics and he was like, well, this isn't really what I wanted to be doing with my life, but everybody really enjoys it and it's got a really good fandom. So I'm going to keep doing it, which is a good enough reason to do anything if you're doing stuff and people are enjoying it and you're getting some satisfaction out of it. But that's, I guess, kind of the long and short of him. He's been he has a YouTube channel and it's been oscillating in activity over the last 10 years. He used to do tours, up until last year, I think you could actually schedule tours down there, to just go through the bowels of this place. And and when I say bowels, some of it was leaky and stuff.
It's bad.
And there was an explosion down there too, right? That closed off some of it.
He, in an attempt to create a new form of energy, caused a gigantic explosion in his warehouse.
I remember
in
this
2013.
now. I remember this now.
It was they were in oxygen tanks, whatever he had created, and he called it hydrilium.
Yeah.
And
oh god,
I think it was September or October of 2013. One of the canisters just exploded, and it caused massive damage that has not fully been fixed yet, and it's been an entire decade.
Oh god, when I was saying all that Doc Brown stuff, I didn't even remember the bit about him creating a whole an entirely new form of energy. But yeah, that goes into him just sort of wanting to change the world and everything. And again, I'm really not trying to shit on Aaron Fector because I really appreciate what he has created. But at the same time, if you just sort of look at the whole situation from an objective adult viewpoint, there are certain conclusions that you can draw that perhaps would not be entirely incorrect.
He's got a rich past, positive and negative. I feel like
he's one of those people where if you're in the South, you say his name and you say bless his heart right after that.
Bless his heart.
Yeah, Aaron Fector, bless his heart. But for all that stuff, he was responsible for creating the entire Rockafire Explosion, all the members of the band, Rolf and Earl, Billy Bob, all that. And he did, the voice for Billy Bob, and he did the voice for a couple of others, didn't he?
Billy Bob, and he also does Rolf and Earl.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Rolf and Earl were always low key my favorites when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I never have watched the full one show tape from Concept Unification for them, and I'm actually interested to do that. I might do that after this, but again, we're diving deep down rabbit holes now, and I can see Josh just being like, "What are you talking about?"
I have something. Brandon, as part of explaining some of that stuff, you were talking about your personal experience going to these places and seeing these shows.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Ash, if you could talk a little bit. I understand that you're coming to the game a little bit later, so some of these places are closed down or even hard to access, but what has been some of your personal experience with going and seeing animatronics?
That's a good question, Josh.
I worked at Chuck E. Cheese for 6 months. But before I did that, right when I started to get into animatronics, I found out that they had a Chuck E. Cheese in Greensboro, which had a 3-stage, which is animatronics that used to be Showbiz Pizza characters, but the cosmetics were changed. They were turned into Chuck E. Cheese characters, which we will get into more of that later as well.
Yeah.
But
I know what you're talking about, if that makes you feel better.
I remember it was about a week after I got it really into it. And I told my roommate, I was like, I'm going to Chuck E. Cheese. And she was like, what? And so me and probably like 5 or 6 of my friends invaded this Chuck E. Cheese, respectfully.
Hell yeah.
And nicely. And we didn't bother anyone. But I just sat in one of the booths right in front of the stage, because this was, at the time, what I thought was the closest I was ever going to get to seeing a Rock-afire explosion set. I really didn't care about Chuck E. Cheese at this point. I was like, this is so awesome. That guy used to be Beach Bear. And so, like, I was sitting in the booth, like, vibrating in my seat because I was just so excited to see all of these characters. And since then, I think I've probably visited all of the locations that are in North Carolina that still have the bots, and there's a few that have renovated that I've visited before, which rest in peace.
Yeah, because Chuck E. Cheese is like currently, if they haven't already, like mostly shifted over to screen characters rather than actual stage characters,
Yes.
right?
I think there's
I
4
think,
locations left in North Carolina that still have bots.
yeah, I think we can owe a lot of that
Gosh.
conversion to like the GIF that you see all the time of that really dilapidated Chuck E. Cheese and like talking, and then it's like "Welcome, children"
Yeah.
or whatever.
Ugh,
That thing's horrible.
it's not good.
Yeah. But I know we have. You're talking about going and seeing those, and how you thought that was going to be the closest you'd ever get to seeing an actual Rock-afire explosion. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that brings us to the commonality that you and I share, which is the Billy Bob's Pizza Wonderland in Barbersville, West Virginia. Yeah, just to introduce it to people a little bit. I'm from Charleston, and I went to college in Huntington. And, when I was a kid, I would go to the Showbiz Pizza in Barbersville. But at some point between when I was a kid and when I went to college, it was after Showbiz Pizza shut down. And I guess you actually might know this a lot better than I do, Ash. But like, did the owner just like buy it out and just spin it off into his own independent restaurant?
Mm-hmm. There were a couple locations like that. There was one location that Aaron Fector actually tried to create, and it was Looney Birds.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it did not last very long. But I think that outside of the Aaron Fector governship, Billy Bob's Wonderland has been doing it up and down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was in college 20 years ago, and Billy Bob's Pizza Wonderland is still there. So that has to say something about it.
It's a plus for sure.
I remember 2 things. I remember my sophomore year of college, two of my friends from high school came to visit, and we said, "Hey, let's just go goof off and go over to the Showbiz Pizza." So we went to the Showbiz Pizza because that was before it stopped being a Showbiz. And we went in and we played some arcade games. And then we were like, oh, this is actually really awkward because we're all like 18, 19 years old. So we gave all of our tickets to some kids having a birthday party, and we went to Outback instead. And then my senior year, one of our professors who we were hanging out with suggested that we go play laser tag over there because they had the laser tag arena connected to it. And I went, and that for me was the first time I'd seen a Rock-afire because we didn't really stay to watch the show when I went a couple years prior. So that was the first time I'd actually gotten up close and looked at a Rock-afire. And anybody who's familiar with the animatronic community knows just how legendarily ill-kept the animatronics at Billy Bob's Pizza Wonderland were for probably the last 15, 20 years. Because the way these things work is just like a metal like skeleton, and then they call them masks. You put them on top of them to, decorate the characters essentially. And the ones at Billy Bob's Pizza Wonderland just looked like garbage.
Well, the assumption is kind of like stuffed animals that are vintage that you see getting restored places like TikTok, where you're going to brush the fur and you're going to wash it and you're going to do all this stuff to keep everything like fluffy and nice. And I would wager that most places probably don't do a great job of that. But I have to imagine, as I understand it, Billy Bob's has crossed paths with Aaron Fector in a less than pleasant manner. And so they can't even get him to help them service their machines anymore, right? Or am I thinking of somewhere else?
So, yes and no. Aaron Fector does not work on any of the machines in Billy Bob's Wonderland at all. He had some rough times with the management there and just decided he was out. There are people in the community that own the molds for the latex masks that are used on the animatronics. And so there are a very limited amount of people that can make these molds out of latex, airbrush them, and send them out.
Wow.
So a lot of the new cosmetics are either made from not super authentic products. Like there's official fur that you're supposed to use on fats, or like official fabric for Billy Bob's overalls or something like that. But they'll either use kind of inauthentic things or they find it from other sellers that are few and far between.
I would like to share something that I looked up in preparation for this recording. Because I was trying to remember that story because I only sort of remembered little hazy bits of, and I forget where I heard it. It was probably in the comments of a YouTube video where people were arguing about it, but it was like, yeah, Billy Bob's Wonderland guy brought Fector in and he got mad at how much Fector was going to charge him to do the work. And he was, Fector was basically like, screw you, I'm out of here. And then Billy Bob's Wonderland was on the blacklist forever. Cause that was when he was still traveling around the country when people asked to help do restorations. Like when he did the restoration on that, oh, you probably know what I'm talking about, but the trailer.
Yes.
Yeah. Where it,
I can't remember the name of it, where they're wearing like beach outfits.
Yeah, exactly. And it only had like three of them on there. But yeah, like he had like a 50-part video on that. But it was when he was still willing to do that kind of stuff. But I found this, and it was from the r/animatronics subreddit.
Oh, dear.
And it's from about 9 months ago. And that the subject is Aaron Fector's thoughts in Billy Bob's Wonderland restoration. And then it has what looks like a Facebook message from Aaron Fector. And then it says, the owners appear to be purchasing inferior bootleg masks from copyright thieves. They are obviously using stolen show tapes and unauthorized show material produced by copyright thieves. The repairs to the show may make them move around, and to the general public, this may look like a big improvement, but I would rather see them sitting there inoperative with trash bags over their heads than to watch this example of copyright thievery. They could have dealt with me and bought authentic Rockafire parts, but basically this is a trashy organization doing whatever they can to circumvent copyright law and willing to use untrained technicians who have no idea what the characters are supposed to look like.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is kind of another Aaron Fector in a nutshell kind of response.
That's very Aaron Fector of him.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so refresh me, but you said you had a birthday party at that Billy Bob's, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Please tell me about that. Please.
My 21st birthday. So I called to make the reservation, and they said, what's the name for the reservation going to be under? And, I said, Ash. And they said, and who's the party for? And I said, Ash. And they were like, how old are you turning? And I was like, 21. So, I brought me, my sister came, a lot of my friends that just knew absolutely nothing about this, but are so supportive. They're great.
And I just want to be clear, you live in North Carolina and you drove up there for that.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, there are worse excuses for a road trip. Let's be real.
I mean,
oh, no, there are. I'm just clarifying for the idea of all these other people coming.
That's fair. That's fair.
There were 10 of us.
Wow.
So we all drove 4 hours. It was a day trip. We did not spend the night. We drove 4 hours back the same day.
Oh, man.
So it was kind of like all the cars came and I was like, pile in. We gotta go. We gotta get there on time. The party starts at 2. So we get there and everyone's like, Ash, we're here. And I'm like, I can't go in there. Because I was like, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So I finally walk in and I see them. Mm-hmm. And I think that the most noticeable thing about them is that they're just so much bigger than you think they're going to be. Mm-hmm. And I walked in and Beecher is my favorite character. I love him. And I saw him and I was like, no, I can't do this. And I turned around and I walked back out. They got me back inside. We sat down and this was shortly after, Braylon. I don't know if you know that name.
No, I don't.
He was one of the techs for a good while. Mm-hmm. That was probably when Aaron was talking about the fake masks and stuff. Mm-hmm. Because
oh yeah, that timing works out probably. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He did a lot of really great work, but there were glaring issues. Beach Bear's mask was actually, they took it off of one of the mascot costumes mm-hmm. and put it on the robot.
Right.
Oh no.
So they're not the same size. So it was just it looked a little funky.
And the lips didn't move or anything, right?
They did. His mouth cylinder was also too small. And mm-hmm. so the mask on the mascot costume is a little bit bigger. So you have big face, tiny mouth cylinder, lots of flopping latex.
Oh. That's
which sounds so weird, but that's the only way I have to describe it.
It's deeply troubling.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll say that still sounds better than the last time I saw them.
Absolutely.
Which looked like they belonged in like Fallout or something like that.
I know. I noticed Aaron Fector did say something in that message about animatronics having trash bags over their heads.
Yeah.
It was because Beach Bear was actually out of commission for I think a little under a year. And instead of just closing the stage down, they just put a gigantic trash bag over him.
Right. So his parts of the show tape would still play, but he just wouldn't do anything?
Yes.
Oh, mm-hmm. That's haunting.
And there was also one part where I think it was while Braylon was fixing him, his eyes were messed up, so they put little sunglasses on him. He actually looked pretty cool. But but they've been through a lot over mm-hmm. the past little bit. I feel like they're kind of going downhill again. Mm-hmm. So I think I had really good timing going to see them, which is nice.
I heard a rumor once, and I think I can't remember if I actually verified this or not, but that there is a shipping container behind the building in which they'll buy robots when they come up on the market, and they'll put them in there to harvest for replacement parts and things. And I feel like years ago I looked this up on Google Maps, and I saw a shipping container that was actually behind the building. Because the thing about where it is now, for people who don't know, which is probably 99.9% of our audience, it moved across the road from its old location, and where it is now, behind it is like a hill and some like woods and stuff. At least it was last time I was there, which was a long time ago. Right across the street from a strip club, actually, the Lion's Den. Yep. And the thing to know about the Lion's Den is if you're driving down I-64 from Charleston to Huntington, you always know when you're close to the Lion's Den, because they've got 2 giant Hollywood-style spotlights that shine up into the sky.
Jeez.
But yeah, it's interesting because of the reputation that Billy Bob's has in the community, that he just keeps it going. It's still there. Like Fector is saying, he's like, just shut it down, because there are so many videos out there of not even necessarily animatronics people, but just sort of like like pop culture kitsch novelty channels that are like, oh, I'm going to the Billy Bob's in Barbersville to see the worst Rockafire Explosion animatronic band in the world. And I've seen at least 3 or 4 of those kind of videos because, you know, like I'm from there. So it's always interesting to me on a different level as well to see that kind of stuff. But they just get poked at so much. It's almost like they still exist. Like he hasn't taken them down just out of spite at this point. Like he's just going to keep it going until the last cog falls out of them.
I actually heard that, well, this is confirmed, but they were just bought by an arcade company.
Really?
Recently. I think it's called Fun City or something like that.
Man.
But if you look on their Facebook page, they're talking about all these new plans. Apparently they're bringing in a ton of new games and keeping like the older ones that still work.
Right.
And they're wanting to build walls around the showroom. So it's more like an actual showbiz, which I think is really cool.
Oh, that would be really cool, especially if they could return it to like the original 3-stage format.
Yeah.
Because again, you've got more recent intelligence than me on this, but when I was there last, it's almost like they'd built like a long platform and they just had them all sort of set up in the same order that they would be set up in on a 3-stage, but it wasn't individual stages.
I think that I can't remember.
You blocked it out. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My sheer excitement.
Yeah. But the 3-stage was the default show for Showbiz, but there were also like some 1-stage variations and things like that, weren't there?
There were a few.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about 1-stage versus 3-stage. It's a term we've mentioned a couple of times now, but I don't know that we've actually contextualized it.
Sure. Ash, take it away.
When we talk about different kinds of stages, it probably leans more towards Chuck E. Cheese and less towards Showbiz. Showbiz had a pretty standard stage setup, so it was kind of like 2 kind of half circles on either side of the stage, kind of like fake wings, and then there was one big stage in the middle.
Okay.
So starting out on the left, you would have Rolf and Earl, which they're it's a animatronic wolf with a little puppet.
Yeah,
and he does like a
was
ventriloquist act.
Yeah, like a ventriloquist / stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he really likes Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
On the other side of the stage, there's Billy Bob and Looney Bird. Billy Bob, face of the place. He's pretty recognizable. I feel like most people would know him.
He's a hillbilly bear who plays a banjo.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can say that because I'm from West Virginia.
Looney Bird's a little sassy. He has some pretty funny moments. He's one of my favorite characters too.
Yeah, and he's not like a full on. He's like he's in a barrel, right?
Yeah,
and he comes out of the barrel.
So he is he's just like a neck up animatronic, and his mechanisms are inside of a barrel.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he'll have little arms that like come up out of the barrel, and then he'll go like read a letter or something.
Yeah.
And then in the middle stage we had Duke. He plays the drums. He's a dog, space dog. Wants to go to space, but he can't. So for now, he's just playing the drums with these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Fats Geronimo. He's super cool. Gorilla with a gold suit. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
He's kind of like the face of the group. He always starts off the show tapes and stuff. Beach Bear. He plays guitar. He's like surfer dude. I like him a lot. He's pretty cool. He's really funny. And then Mitzi, and she's a cheerleader, and she's also the lead female vocals.
Yeah. And
she's kind of like Southern gossip-y girl.
And she's a mouse.
Yeah, she's a mouse.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the typical 3-stage setup for Showbiz Pizza. But with Chuck E. Cheese, for some of these stages, they had the same stage setup as Showbiz Pizza just because they were changed from Showbiz into Chuck E. Cheese. But there are other sets. There are 2 other types of animatronics in the Chuck E. Cheese portion, but I don't know if we should be there yet.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. One of them is the Garner Holt Productions animatronics. They're more commonly known as Studio C. There are like 4 or 5 different stages made just for Studio C animatronics. And Studio C animatronics only had Chuck E. Cheese. Like, he was the only one that they had.
Okay.
And was that like the later years?
That was like, the production started for those, I think, in 2000 or 2000.
Okay.
Like, going out into stores that weren't test stores.
Yeah. So relatively speaking, the later years after concept unification. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The other sets that they used are Cyberamics. And Cyberamics were kind of what they used before they fused with Showbiz, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
These are when people think of like a creepy animatronic, I feel like that's what they think of.
The Cyberamics machines?
Yes.
Was that the Pizza Time Theater era?
That was shortly after, but those can still be considered Cyberamics as well.
Yeah, because like whenever I see a video of like any of the Pizza Time Theater, like cabaret or like portrait shows or anything like that, that's what I like. That is my definition of a creepy animatronic.
Yeah, it's definitely a little off-putting if you're not used to seeing them, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're cool.
The name Cyberamic almost suggests that it's like ceramic pieces to them. Is that accurate, or am I missing the mark there?
Not really. They were just typical. They were actually really simple. Their shells, or I guess like the mech is what's controlling the bots in the middle, was like really made of really thin metal, almost like sheet metal. And then everything was attached to the side. They were very, very simple. I think that they decided that they could do this, and then they just kind of stuck with it until 1997.
Yeah. Were they pneumatically? Yeah, they were pneumatically powered as well, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Did they ever, in the later years, like change it so it was just run off electric servo motors or anything like that?
There are still tubes under the stage.
Okay.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That I've always wondered. I've always wondered why they never did something like that, especially like to make it like more cost efficient. For example, yeah, I have no answer or comment to that. I just wanted to throw it out there. Like I never understood why they didn't do that.
I feel like
for the robots,
when they made the jump to the Studio C animatronics, which is what any new stores that they had, they put those in post 2000. Those are also pneumatically powered, and I don't know why. I don't know if technology was not that advanced at the time, or maybe that's just the most efficient way to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
I mean, there was a time period in history where they thought that pneumatic was going to be everywhere. Like that you were going to have pneumatic tubes that would run through an entire neighborhood and deliver the mail. Like,
yeah,
it was not a very long-lived period, because then they started trying to implement that in a greater than a one building space. And it's like, actually, pneumatics are really hard to maintain.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that ties in a little bit to like one of the main inspirations for like Aaron Fechter's vision and Rockafire, really, because when I think of stuff like what you're talking about, Josh, I think of like, you know, the 1950s vision of the future, which makes me think of Epcot Center, which makes me think of Disney animatronics, which is really what Aaron Fechter was going for there, because he wanted to be better than Disney. When he was so inspired by Disney, and he was like, oh, I think we can like make this. I think we can do this better than them. He was really like, his model for everything was like the Disney Imagineers and the process they use for creativity and everything. and he wanted to essentially make each Showbiz Pizza feel like a little sort of very miniature Disneyland. So it's kind of interesting that you mentioned that, because he like talks a lot about Disney animatronics. If you ever like watch a video of him talking or anything like that. So we were talking about the 3-stage a minute ago, and one of my favorite things about Showbiz, I never actually got to see this in person, was just their, like, when they experimented with changing out the Rolf and Earl stage with the Uncle Clunk animatronic, which is seriously one of the creepiest freaking things you'll ever see in your life. Josh, I can see you looking like, what are they talking about? Ash, if you want to explain the horror that is the Uncle Clunk animatronic.
Uncle Clunk was a character that was created by Aaron Fechter. He's meant to be like, in my opinion, kind of like a Three Stooges slapstick comedy kind of just like silly character. And he would answer phone calls, and he actually had a table beside him that had a phone and a banana, and he could actually, like, one of his slapstick jokes is that he would accidentally pick up the banana. So this animatronic was physically capable of like gripping onto this and grabbing it and then putting it down, grabbing the other thing and getting that instead, which I think is way beyond its time.
That was
really
like
cool.
a significant achievement at the time for what they were doing. But yeah, it was like, I've watched the Clunk show tape. And it's just bad.
It's not good.
It's goofy, it's bad, it's full of dad jokes.
That's a good way to describe it.
I mean, that sounds like my kind of scene, but I pulled a Google image search for Uncle Clunk, and wow.
I'm proud of you for not screaming.
Imagine being 5 or 6 years old and sitting, like 4 feet from the stage, and the curtain opens up and that thing is sitting right there.
It's just like, I know some kids find clowns terrifying. I think anyone who is even on the verge of coulrophobia would be like, I can't be in the same room as this.
Yeah. And like, they didn't make a lot of Clunks, and they almost immediately like realized that this was not improving like any kind of sales at any of the stores. So then they got into this whole plan of like, oh, how can we repurpose it? Because we've already paid for so many of these. We have to figure out something. So one of them was they dressed him up as Santa Claus, and they would put him in there in like November and December to do a Santa show tape. And it was very obviously just Uncle Clunk in a Santa costume. And then there was another one they had at some places called Country Clunk, and it was him dressed like a hillbilly with a corncob pipe. And I think they had that one like not necessarily on the stage, but they would put it like out in like a more public area. And he would have like jugs with XXX written on it and like sitting on some mash or something like that. And again, it was very clearly Uncle Clunk in a stupid costume. And then the other thing they did was they had an exhibit there, like an interactive exhibit, which was like, those art exhibits where they actually take human bodies and they will display them like, so you can see the muscle and the skeleton and everything like that. They essentially did that with Uncle Clunk, and you could see like half of him was regular Clunk and the other half of him was like stripped down to the actual robot. And you could like press buttons to control it, and it was supposed to teach kids about animatronics.
Oh no. That's a very horrifying way to do that, friends.
Yeah, it was like Clunk just like, it started out as a really scary thing, and it only got progressively more awkward and scary as they tried to figure out what to do with it until they decided to just get rid of it altogether.
Fun fact about...
That's my favorite, least favorite.
Fun fact about the Country Clunk. He was quarter operated, and his purpose was to give you like life advice. So you would put a quarter in, and I don't know how many things that he said, but his thing is that he would give you advice. Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
He's like a animatronic magic 8-ball.
I think there are some locations that actually called him Uncle Pappy too, which makes it sound
Uncle
even
Pappy.
stupider. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that was their only experiment with changing out parts of the 3-stage in Showbiz. But they probably would have kept doing it had they not consolidated all the business together, which is a perfect time for us to talk about concept unification, and some of the greatest training videos for any corporation that I've ever seen. Because concept unification was like the code word within the company because they decided they were going all in on the Chuck E. Cheese brand. So they were converting. And part of that was because via Pizza Time Theater and the way the company was spun up, the company already owned the intellectual property to the Chuck E. Cheese characters. But since Rockafire was created by Aaron Fechter, he owned it. And I think and Ash, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when all that was going on and they were just trying to decide what they wanted to do in terms of moving forward with the company, knowing they had to consolidate, I think they offered to buy the Rockafire explosion from Fechter just outright. And he was like, absolutely not. And I think he said at one point, he's like, at that point, I didn't know what the limits of the IP were. I thought we might be able to get like a Saturday morning cartoon out of this or something. And I didn't want to give it up, which at the time actually was probably kind of reasonable. Like if you're going to sell your IP, at least get some sort of royalty agreement for it rather than just selling it outright. But so they had to convert all these over to the Chuck E. Cheese characters. And the concept unification video is one of the most haunting things I have ever watched. And haunting, I believe, is the only word really to describe it. Ash, when we were chatting very briefly at Queen City Anime Con, I mentioned to you that sometimes at work, I would just put on the concept unification tape in the background so I can listen to its like bizarre 3 o'clock in the morning. You find it on like a public access channel kind of music. And yeah. And you got that guy who's talking like this. They're like, remove the bolts from the bottom of Fatz's organ, but save the organ because you will need it later. And it's like, take off the tree trunk around Choo Choo and destroy it as it will no longer be required. And it's a guy with sort of like a vaguely Southern voice, just cheerfully talking about the deconstruction and destruction of these characters. Like, talk to me about sort of your impressions and your response to that video.
I think that one of my favorite things about that video as a whole is the fact that there's almost this liminal space music playing in the background the entire time.
Yes, that's the perfect way to describe it. That's the perfect way to describe it.
The concept unification video, it is important to mention that during concept unification, every animatronic was reused except for Billy Bob. So all of those Billy Bob animatronics were just tossed out. Yeah.
I'd forgotten that, but yeah.
So when they say in the video, they're like, unscrew Billy Bob from the ground and like destroy him as he will never be used again. I'm like, he's used in my heart. But
I have to think some of that too, like because Fechter was the voice of Billy Bob. There has to be some symbolism there of just throwing out Billy Bob and not reusing
Well, there
it.
might also be that Fechter had tighter copyright on the characters he voiced. And like, you know, I imagine they had their reasons for doing such things. I am picturing some like college age student pizza place employees being like, all right, we're taking Billy Bob out back and we're going to use the bats.
Like Office Space.
there are actually some pretty strict rules about, like we talked earlier, of the Chuck E. Cheese renovating. When they renovate and they take the bots out and all of the old decorations and stuff, they actually have to destroy them before they put them in the dumpsters, just to, I guess, to preserve intellectual property, which is
yeah, that's actually pretty common for like lots of places. Like once upon a time I worked at a Blockbuster Video, another herald of a bygone era. But whenever we would throw stuff out, like cover boxes and things like that we couldn't sell through, we always had to take a box cutter to them. And just, that was just policy. And that's why, like, you're exactly right. It's so nobody can take it.
Especially, I feel like all of the, like the mascot costumes and stuff, someone takes them and then commits a crime or something. That would be such a bad idea, but
yeah, the Billy Bob murders.
I'm just picturing a gang of bank robbers used to work at a Showtime Pizza that was being unified, and they didn't destroy the costumes, they kept them. 10 years later, the heist of the century.
That would actually be really cool.
Yeah. That sounds to me like a DLC for a Five Nights at Freddy's game.
I was thinking it'd make a good movie, so Hollywood, hit me up.
But that video is just like, it's 30 minutes of just being transported to some bizarre alternate universe. And then at the end of it, there was a sneak preview of the new Chuck E. Cheese Munch's Make Believe Band ensemble, and it's really creepy, like when you know exactly what it is there and how they've moved the characters. Like, you know, they killed Billy Bob, and then they took Duke's skeleton and moved it to stage right, and then put the skin of an Italian pizza chef on it. Like, Rolf and Earl became Chuck E. Cheese. Mitzi became Helen Henny. Beach Bear became Jasper Jowls, and then Fats Geronimo became Mr. Munch, who is basically like a second-rate Grimace, because he's purple and sort of an amorphous monster kind of situation. But I will say that the opening song in that video just really slaps. I don't know the title of it, but it's just like, you know, feel the magic.
Together we got it. It's such a good song.
Yeah,
so good.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah, I will also sometimes just play that when I'm working in the background.
They actually recently did a recreation of it with the new voice actors. I've seen that video, and they do weird lyrical tweaks. It's very
to it
interesting. It could be different than it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually like. This is getting way off topic in something that's already off topic, but like, I actually prefer the character designs of the screen characters for the Chuck E. Cheese characters rather than the animatronics of it. I think they're just they're much more child friendly. They're less threatening.
I think that there are definitely some times where I'll go to a Chuck E. Cheese that used to be a Showbiz Pizza, and, you know, I'm taking a look at every little thing, and I'm like, is this different? I've literally hopped up on the stage and like fixed the snaps on Munch's back. Like, yeah.
God, have they ever yelled at you for that?
Yeah.
They're just happy for the free help.
But there was this one time, I think I walked into the Greensboro location before they renovated, and during concept unification, they actually took some of the animatronics' eyes and switched them out because they had different colored eyes. And so, which is...
That's right.
Weird.
Yeah, because didn't they swap, like, weren't you supposed to swap in that video, like, Beach Bear's eyes with Rolf's eyes, or Rolf and Earl's eyes? Yeah.
I think that when the Greensboro location, Chuck had green eyes, which would have been Mitzi's eyes. And they were just all in the wrong order. Mm-hmm. It was very odd. It's very odd.
Just make it so no one of them has the same two colors of eyes.
Give them all
just juggle them
around
like that. One thing I like, there's like two more things I would just love for us to hit before we wrap up. But just like touching on like Fector again and just some of the other weird stuff that he's done with some of his animatronics, because while Rockafire is the thing he was most well known for, there were some other sort of bizarre ones, some of which saw the light of day and some of them didn't. And like the one that I always come back to whenever anybody makes fun of me for like really being deep into the animatronic stuff, I'm always like, let me show you this. Let me show you this video of the Confederate Critter Show from I think it's Gatlinburg, Tennessee. You've seen that video, haven't you, Ash? Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's like a bear, a wolf, and a dog, and they're Confederate soldiers, and they sing all these songs about being Southern gentlemen and the South will rise again and everything. There's a very like mid-quality video on YouTube that somebody uploaded from like a family in 1989, recorded it on on a VHS camcorder. And my favorite thing about it is that the act included an actual human who was dressed as a Union private so that the Confederate critters could make fun of them.
Oh.
It is, I think, Josh and I are in Richmond, so this has sort of a special resonance for us here about just how wrong that is. But I encourage anybody to watch it just for a real WTF kind of moment.
It exists on the internet.
Yeah, but it just goes to show that the power of animatronic robots can be used for evil, in addition to be using for good. And the other one that I really enjoy is the Moon Rockers, which you can see on YouTube. I think where that's clipped from is one of the tours that he was giving, and he just like fired up the show tape for it and just had it run. And it's all it is a converted Rockafire. It's very easy and obvious to see that that's what it is, but they're like these aliens that live in the center of the moon, and they've come. And this again goes back to sort of Fector's idealism and how he wanted to like improve the world. But the whole idea behind the Moon Rockers is that they're telling us like everything we're doing wrong and how we need to like save the environment and save the planet and all this stuff. It's not a bad message, but it's odd. The delivery vehicle for it in the form of singing animal robots at a pizza that should have been at a pizza place is a little suspect.
It's definitely got some Captain Planet energy. Yeah.
Absolutely. Are there any others? Because like I know he's got a few other animatronic characters that like really didn't see the light of day, but they existed or perhaps still exist somewhere in the bowels of that warehouse. Can you think of any?
So there's a couple I can think of. There's the creative engineering clown, which I'm pretty sure in this day and age is some form of like creepypasta image, I guess. But there is a very heavily spread image of it online, and people do not like it. I don't really know what it was used for, unfortunately, but it's been like there's multiple warehouse tours where he's taking them through, and he's just like, well, here's the clown, and then he just doesn't talk about it anymore. So there's that.
Yeah. And it's like in a dark, one of those dark hallways that it seems like every hallway in creative engineering is just some nasty dark hallway.
But there's also the Midget animatronics, which are the new Rockafire explosion.
That sounds familiar.
Yes.
Oh, was that V2? Okay. The Dancetronics.
Yes. Which those were, unfortunately, most things after the Rockafire explosion are commercial failures when it comes to Aaron Fector. But the new Rockafire explosion was Aaron's attempt to rebrand after everything that happened with Chuck E. Cheese. So he created a stage. The best way I have to describe it, the stage in Hamilton, how it spins around. The new Rockafire explosion had the same concept. So in the front, in the middle, it was Fats and Billy Bob and Mitzi, and then they could like go around the stage, and it would look like they're actually moving and dancing and doing all this stuff. And then on the two sides where you would typically have Rolf and Earl and Billy Bob, there were it was kind of like a half stage, and when you turned it around, it was something completely different. So on one side,
so it was essentially a 5-stage.
Yeah, essentially. But on one side, you would have like Looney Bird, and it was Looney Bird in his lab because he liked to create stuff. And then on the other side, it was Beach Bear,
right?
And he was like in his own little space. And then Duke had his little junkyard and stuff like that.
Yeah, I always found Duke's junkyard was like an odd choice there since it wasn't space themed.
I agree.
It was Sanford and Son themed for some reason.
Yeah.
That like the good thing about the Dancetronics is that there's that that really solid promo video for it exists that has like really good production values. So if you're ever interested in seeing that, it's maybe like 10 minutes long, but it's it shows how interesting it would have been. Because I think as part of that rebrand, and I don't remember where I saw this, so it's just like hearsay, like most of the stuff I remember from this, but I feel like he was trying to get that into like not like a pizza place or a restaurant or something like that, but a more like sort of like higher end entertainment establishment, like maybe like something akin to like maybe like a Universal Studios resort type of thing, like not Disney. Yeah, not Disney, but
like
Disney
an amusement
adjacent.
Park
Something like
I was
that.
about to say Casa Bonitas, perhaps.
I'm unfamiliar.
Yes,
Brandon, we got to
Casa
get you
Bonita.
to the Midwest and have you see a Casa Bonita stage show, because I think it's not animatronic at all, but I think you would enjoy it for a lot of the same reasons.
Okay. If it's self-aware and dumb, then probably.
It is very self-aware and highly, highly dumb.
Yeah. Speaking of highly dumb, but perhaps not self-aware, let's close out by talking a little bit about Chris Thrash and his home animatronic studio. I imagine, Ash, you were introduced to Chris Thrash via the documentary. Yeah, I had the great fortune of years before that documentary was produced, stumbling upon Chris Thrash's YouTube channel. And for everybody else, Chris Thrash is this guy. I think he's in Tennessee. I can't remember, but he had a dream to own his own Rockafire explosion. And so eventually he gets the money together to do it. He goes down to Florida. He rents a truck. He goes to Aaron's warehouse and he, by God, buys a Rockafire explosion. Because Aaron had a bunch of them that were still in box. And so he drives it back to Tennessee and he builds a giant building in his backyard, assembles them, has the whole pneumatic system and everything. And he worked like 2 or 3 jobs to pay for all this. And like the very first time I discovered this, it just random. I think it was like, because my animatronic fascination over the years has gone sort of in waxes and wanes. So like, every couple of years I would be like, I'm gonna do some more research on Showbiz Pizza, etc. And then maybe around like 2008 or something like that, I looked and Chris had created this. And the very first video I saw was, of course, the Bubba Sparks video that he did, because not only did he assemble them and make them sing, he figured out how to program them, and he created his own show tapes for them with modern songs. He's got one with Yin Yang Twins. He's got, it's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. And he's,
Hey there, Delilah.
yeah, exactly. Because that's Beach Bear singing it, right? Yeah.
No, I think it's Billy Bob, actually.
Is it? Oh, you're right. It is Billy Bob. I remember now that you say that. But that part of the documentary is just so crazy. And I don't mean crazy in any kind of insulting way. It's just so crazy. Like, there's like, I've had goals in my life that I've wanted to achieve, but I'm not sure I've ever wanted something as bad as this man, Chris Thrash, wanted a Rockafire explosion in his backyard.
Oh, absolutely.
I did a little quick Googling. It's not Tennessee, it's Alabama.
Okay, closer to Florida. Easier to make the drive.
Surely.
That whole documentary is just like a real banger. Like, I encourage anybody to watch it, but just and I'm not sure what happened with Chris Thrash, because he stopped uploading a long time ago. And I've I heard that at one point he actually tried to open a location, like an actual like store or restaurant where he could put these things and have them do stuff. And I feel like it was open for a while and then it closed, but I haven't looked into him a lot, but I just remember that I just know that he stopped uploading. And I'm, because believe me, if I had the free time and one of those things in my backyard, I would be programming all kinds of stuff to it. Like I would be having Rocket Fire Explosion playing Through Fire and Flames. Like just see if Beach Bear can tap the frets that fast on something like that.
And he absolutely could.
Absolutely, because he's the greatest guitar player of all time. Jasper Giles ain't got nothing on Beach Bear.
Not even close.
Didn't you say Beach Bear was your other cosplay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's he's been through a lot cosplay wise for me. The first time that I cosplayed him, it was a little rough, but we made it there.
So
definitely some trial and error because he's a giant bear, but I did what I could.
Is your Chuck E. Cheese still in progress?
My Avenger Chuck, which is, if you're unfamiliar with the different eras of Chuck E. Cheese, it's like Avenger is like the early 2000s, probably what you think of when you think of Chuck E. Cheese, like the green shorts and the purple shirt with the C on it, backwards hat.
Chuck E. Extreme.
Yes, extreme, cool, skateboard realness. But so that cosplay was kind of thrown together, and I just haven't really done anything else with it. But I really want to cosplay the predecessor to that version, which is usually called Tux Chuck, because he's wearing like just a tuxedo, and he's got like a gold cummerbund and like a red bow tie and a little hat.
Yeah, that was like Concept Unification debut Chuck, right?
Yes.
Yeah, fancy Chuck. Even though he's the star, even though he's got that star behind him, he's not the star of the show.
You are. I love him. He's definitely my favorite iteration.
What would be the next character you would like if you had to go in order of like all the ones you were going to cosplay? What would you do next?
Oh, that's a good question. If we were thinking Rockafire, it would probably be Billy Bob, because that would be so much fun. I would definitely have to suck it up and paint a pair of overalls, vertical red and yellow stripes, but it'd be worth it. But if we're talking Chuck E. Cheese, then probably like that same early 2000s Jasper. He's got the little like cow print button up with the overalls, the little bandana.
Very Toy Story Woody.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Here's a question. Do you regret that you were born so late that you didn't get to see all this stuff in its heyday?
I think about this every day of my life. Kind of. It's a weird way that I feel about it, because definitely when I first got into it, I was like, I was born in the wrong generation. But now I feel like knowing everything and kind of being able to see the Rockafire explosion from an outward perspective from start to finish, I don't know if I would change that.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
I think that going into this thing that I just love so much, and if I loved it when it was happening and then it ended, I think I would have been very devastated.
Yeah, I can understand that, because that's sort of where I was. Maybe not to the degree of devastation, but just like really disappointed that like it was something that I thought was really cool. And even though I sort of grew up and fell out of it for a long time, when I got older and realized I couldn't go back to it because it just wasn't there anymore, I'm like, oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
I would have, because like, I know there are some people who are like, well, what are you talking about? You were lucky because you lived near Billy Bob's Pizza Wonderland and could go in there and see that stuff. But it's not the same. It doesn't matter. Like they could have a spot on perfect recreation of it up on that stage they've got there, but without it being in sort of the dim lighting on a 3 stage and everything. It's just a little bit different. It's not quite the same. And that sort of soured me for a few years on the whole, like, robots who sing while I eat pizza kind of thing.
I think that hopefully in the future, if they actually go through with the plan of building the wall around the showroom and maybe having some lights installed in there, because I noticed a real issue for me when I was there. I had a lot of trouble hearing, specifically not the songs, but the bits in between the songs, which are also very good. So that was a little disappointing, because I'm at a point where if I hear the beginning of probably any Rockafire show tape, I could tell you what it was. Is that good? We'll figure that out at a later point. But I was a little disappointed that I really couldn't hear what all was going on while it was happening. But I think that if they do go through with that, it would be very helpful, as well as kind of bring the magic back.
Yeah, I think if I were to ask myself that same question that I asked you, I think I regret that I never had a chance to see a real Pizza Time Theater restaurant, because everything I've ever read about those is just like, it was like dial the sort of the grit and grunge up just a little bit, because they had like the main showroom, whether it was the portrait show or the porch show or anything, and then you had the cabaret room with some of those weird one-off characters, like the hippopotamus or the lion that sang Elvis, or there was like, weren't there dogs that were the Beatles as well?
The Beagles.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. Okay. I feel stupid now that I forgot that. But yeah, some of those just like weird one-off animatronics that you never see anymore. I think. And you know, there's thousands and thousands of YouTube channels out there that have like these spottings of these like animatronic characters out in the wild and things like that. Like I think there's one of those, like the lion who sang Elvis, who I believe was called the King. Naturally, you can find that, like, or at least for a while, you can find that at some weird amusement park out in the middle of nowhere. Some places have very clearly reskinned animatronics and things like that. It was funny. After we met you, I was telling, after I got back, I was telling a friend of mine who's not part of Goblins and Growlers, but who also thinks that my fascination with animatronics is just as dumb as they think it is. But I was telling him about it, and he's like, "Oh, that's funny." And then coincidentally, that same day, he went to the Tom Leonard's in Richmond, and he texted me. He's like, "Holy shit, there's like singing robots here." And I was like, "What?" And they weren't doing anything, so he didn't take a picture. And I was like, well, I don't care if they're not doing anything. Take a picture, because I don't want to have to drive out to Short Pump to see.
I'm not going to see them moving in the picture. Just take a picture of it.
So I was actually hanging out with him today, and he's like, oh, I have to stop by Tom Leonard's after I drop you off so I can pick up dinner for my family. And I was like, oh, this is perfect, because I'm talking about the animatronic stuff tonight. Please text me a picture from the Tom Leonard's. And so he got there and he sent me a picture, and he made it sound like it was going to be like Billy Bob or something like that. But it's just these weird, like, one-off characters. I'll send you the video of it, Ash, after this is over. But I tried to figure out what the what they were originally before they got reskinned, because like one of them is like wearing a Richmond Flying Squirrels, that's our local baseball team, like jersey. It's like they're standing up, but they're playing guitar. So it might be an old Billy Bob, because I can't think of any other animatronic that would have that motion. So it's probably like, it might be 2 Billy Bobs that they just reskinned. Because otherwise, like, it would have to be like a beach bear that you put like the torso on top of like Mitzi or something, but it doesn't work like that because they're not modular.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's an aside in an episode full of asides that I just thought it was funny that I finally got closure on that today, that he sent me that picture. And when he sent me the video, he was like, they just started like running some loud machinery, so you can't hear exactly what they're singing, but it's just like very like playing the guitar like that. It has to be a Billy Bob the more I think about it, but it's just not done very well. It's not done very well at all. Yeah. Josh, your punishment's about over now. So how do you feel about everything, and what questions do you have?
I feel significantly more educated about animatronics in general. I think the questions that I have are ones that probably I will need to research on my own, unless y'all know a whole lot about the actual mechanics of animatronic robots. Because I know it's like pneumatic tubes, but like air compression, and then the show tapes control everything. Like I'm kind of intrigued about what happens underneath the veneer of, the hands going up and down to play the guitar and all of those things. And honestly, we're past the hour and 15 mark. Even if y'all have that knowledge, this is something I need to research for myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the programming is just synced to the show tape. Ash, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you actually worked at a Chuck E. Cheese, so you might know that a little bit better than I do.
No, you're right. They are, they're just synced to the show tapes. The show tapes used to be on floppy disks, but now they're on, DVDs.
Interesting.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and I don't have an answer for the rest of your question, because I know the concept of pneumatics and hydraulics and how they're basically the same, except one's liquid and one's air. But not being a mechanical engineer, I don't really understand exactly how all that works.
I sort of do, but you'll probably have an easier time just researching it on your own.
Yeah. Josh is a smart guy. He might be able to figure it out. Yeah. There is, and it's amazing we've talked this long, but there is such a tremendous amount of errata about this topic that we have not even touched upon. Digging deeper into the weird Pizza Time Theater characters that just sort of never made the cut. More weird Uncle Clunk Santa Claus stuff. Just Aaron Fechter, just in general.
As a concept, yes.
Yeah, exactly. His is a concept that needs some unification in his own mind, I think. You could do a 3-part episode just on the concept unification video and some of that stuff, or the Danceatronics video or something like that. Would you ever want to talk about this stuff again, Ash?
Absolutely.
Okay.
100%. I'm so down.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, because fair play to all involved, but we did kind of just sort of throw this together. Oh, hey, this would be a really fun conversation. I think if we ever came back at this with some targeted topics and research and really focused in, I think we could do something really cool. But Ash, I'm sure I speak for Josh as well, but I'm so thrilled that you were willing to come on here and help me sort of indulge my fascination with this stuff. And I know Josh is just sitting there yeah. And Alon's going to be listening to this just I cannot believe this.
I'm happy to be here. Seriously. This has been great. I never get to talk about this stuff in detail. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. Well, the way my spectrum behaviors work, I always want to talk about these things in detail, and I never get a chance to. That's why Josh is here to keep us on topic today. But Josh, do you have any closing thoughts there?
I found the whole conversation very fascinating. I know a whole lot more about animatronics than I ever thought I would need to. And I think if we don't provide some links for a few of these videos and things, I think our audience is going to be come on, guys, we gotta have the juice.
Yeah.
Where's you kept talking about all these things? We need them.
Yeah. Ash, if you've got some favorite resources, if you want to email them to me, I'll put them in the show notes. I imagine we have some overlap, but you probably frankly know more than me. So I'd love to have you tap into your mind on that for me. But yeah, thanks everybody for listening to this. It's very much off brand from what we normally talk about, but it was opportunity to talk with somebody. It was good timing as well. And we just, for as much as you all have had to listen to me interject animatronics into various conversations over the years, I thought the topic deserved a more thorough discussion. So Josh, if you want to tell people where they can find us.
Well, for starts, telephone, telegraph, tell a friend about the Goblins and Growlers podcast. Word of mouth is the best way for us to get spread around. And if you haven't already left us a 5-star review, then we would encourage you to do so. If you have left us a 5-star review, then maybe go pester the person beside you to go leave us a 5-star review. They don't have to have listened to the show. I don't care about that.
And what do they do if they don't want to leave us a review that's 5 stars?
They can come and talk to us about it on the Discord. That's bit.ly/Goblin Discord. They can give us their 4-star review nearly in person.
Nearly in person. It's close enough. And then sign up for our newsletter. It's monthly. It's gaming news. We don't spam you. It's at the top of our link tree, linktr.ee/Goblins and Growlers. Ash, do you want to plug your social media again?
Sure. I mostly only use Instagram and TikTok, but it's at wi.ffy. I cosplay Chuck E. Cheese, and I try.
That's really in the world today, with the economy and the job market the way it is, trying is all we can do.
Mm-hmm.
That's all anyone can ask for.
Yeah. And on that very optimistic and healthful note, we end. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Goblins and Growlers podcast. Josh and I will catch you back in about 2 weeks, after which time Josh will hopefully have recovered from Dragon.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So thanks, everybody, for listening. And thanks again to Ash for taking the time out of your Sunday evening, when I know you've probably got other stuff to do, to talk about air-powered robots with us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Bye, y'all.
If you like what you hear, consider subscribing and giving us a review over on Apple Podcasts. Especially early in the feed, subscriptions and reviews are super helpful for bringing new listeners our way. Thank you.